Alright guys, Brad Langley again coming to you with episode 2 of the Kicking Clinic. Okay, we remember from last time we just basically introduced you to my approach to kicking and my approach to coaching. And if you remember, I said it was we used a differential diagnosis. If you remember in the first episode, I did talk about the 5 elements of kicking and just said how that we use 5 elements of kicking to help with this differential diagnosis. One of the things that maybe I didn't explain very well is what exactly is a differential diagnosis. So I'm going to take a second real quickly to talk about that. As you see right here behind me, I have the 5 elements of kicking listed. Today we're actually going to be talking about the Plantfoot. We'll be right here talking about the Plantfoot today, but before we get into that, basically what we're doing in a differential diagnosis is we're systematically working through each of these five elements here and figuring out did we do that thing right, or did we do it wrong, or what exactly happened. So for example, number one, we look at the plant foot. Was my plant foot too wide, was it too narrow, and then we basically go from there. And if it was good, if the plant foot was good, then we know that's not the problem, and we move on to the kicking position, which is coming up in episode 3. But anyway, so just a recap on last episode is we're using a differential diagnosis to basically systematically work through to figure out what we did right, and more importantly what we did wrong, so we can fix the problem and become better kickers. So like I said, today we are addressing number one, or not necessarily the number one, but the first of 5 elements, first of the 5 elements, which is your plant foot. Okay, so your plant foot, just to make sure we're all on the same page, if you're a right-footed kicker, your plant foot will be your left foot, and then if you're a left-footed kicker, obviously your plant foot will be your right foot. Alright? So basically, before we get into where your plant foot goes and all that kind of fun stuff, I like to take time to just figure out why is the plant foot important? Okay, what is the purpose of the plant foot? Okay, so the plant foot, really and truly, all it does is help translate our body from basically behind where the ball is placed to in front of where the ball is placed. So basically what I'm saying is it's almost a pivot point or even a springboard to just let our body move through the kick and into the follow through. Okay, I actually don't really like the term plant foot because it kind of implies, hey, you plant, you stick it, and you hold that position. That's not really what we do at all. We're not real aggressive. That foot does not drive into the ground and stay there. It really just kind of presses onto the ground and moves forward. So I'm going to attempt to draw you a picture to help explain this a little bit. Forgive me, I'm not an artist. So what we're doing here, that's a foot, that's an ankle, and that's the lower leg. Okay, so then your knee would be right there. Okay, so foot, ankle, lower leg, and then that's the knee. Okay, so this is our plant foot. As we come into our plant foot, right? So as we're coming into the plant foot, obviously we're a little bit further behind our plant foot, so we're stepping just like you're walking. Okay, so in this drawing, that's my foot, that's my ankle, right? That's my lower leg, and that's my knee. So that's kind of how we come into the kick, right? So right there. So that's kind of how we come into the kick, right? So the whole point of the plant foot is basically to be somewhat of a stable platform, just so we don't fall down. So that lower leg and therefore the body on top of it can translate forward. So as we plant, our heel hits the ground, we make a good plant foot, and then this lower leg is going to translate over. Right? Imagine, there you go. Right? Midpoint of the kick, right foot, if you're a right-footed kicker, is making contact with the ball. Alright, this is your leg coming forward, right? So that's how you come into the kick. Foot to ball contact, right? We're moving forward throughout our kick. Our plant foot leg is coming on forward, right? And then eventually your foot will kind of come up. You'll actually come up onto your toe a little bit. and then finish the kick going forward. Okay, so the best way I can kind of help describe this, I hope that was clear. I don't know, it's clear in my head. A lot of times stuff that's clear in my head is not clear in anybody else's. But the best way to describe this is just like walking. If you look at your feet walk, you heel strike first, and then your body translate over your foot, right? You come up onto your toe, and then you move on forward. So when you're walking, you're not stomping and planting your feet. Your feet are more or less just kind of gliding over the ground, so that they basically just keep you from falling. It's kind of like a controlled fall forward, if that makes sense at all. I hope it does. All right. So that's kind of the why behind the plant foot. Why is the plant foot important? So now we get into, let's get into where we actually put our plant foot, okay? So for that, we're going to come over here. I got a ball and everything set up. All right, so the easiest way to figure out, hey, I've never kicked before, I don't really know where my plant foot's supposed to be. The easiest place, the easiest way to figure out how wide, oh, excuse me, let me back up here. I'm getting ahead of myself. Two components of a plant foot. You have your width and your depth. Okay? Width is basically how far to the side away from the ball you are. So that's kind of the right and left, okay? And then the depth, that is, I use that term to refer to how forward, toward the goal you are versus how far away you are, okay? I will explain a little bit more. All right, so like I was trying to say before I got distracted, the first thing you got to do is figure out the width of your plant foot. How wide, okay? And the easiest way to do this, I never kicked a ball before in my life. The easiest way to kind of get a ballpark reference of where your plant foot width should be is to use your own foot. So I'm going to turn the camera around, and you see I got a cleat and everything. There's no foot in it because I got to use them not to fall down myself. Anyway, so here it is. So here's the ball. This is one of my old cleats right here. Just like that. So I'm trying to figure out how wide do I need to be away from the ball. So that is, wide is this way. Narrow is toward the ball. Depth refers to how deep that's going toward my target, or how shallow, how far away from my target is. So kind of in front of the ball is deep, behind the ball is shallow, to the left of the ball is wide, in close to the ball is narrow. Kind of obvious there. Alright, so how wide do I need to be? I take my shoe or my foot and I put it just like that, because everybody's foot's a little bit longer or a little bit shorter, and so the width, some people with really short feet, kind of like me, can get away with being a little bit closer to the ball. People with a little bit longer foot needs to be a little bit away from the ball. So good easy reference. I'm going to put my shoe down there, and so that's going to give me a good kind of reference. I know I need to be about yay far wide. Okay, now we'll see that you actually end up being a little bit more narrow just in your natural stance, but it gives us a ballpark. This is just a how I get started. Okay, so this is not written in stone. So roughly about yay far. If you can see, if I were to put my foot like that, bam. Okay, so that's about how far wide I need to be. Now we need to figure out the depth. Now the depth depends a lot on, are you kicking off the ground? Are you kicking off a 2-inch block? Or are you kicking off a 1-inch block or whatever? So if you're in high school, a lot of people kick off a 1-inch block, or excuse me, a 2-inch block. So basically the rule of thumb is, if you're kicking off of a block, the higher the block, the more shallow you need to be. Okay? So as you see right here, this is off the ground. So if you're in college or kicking in the pros, obviously that's off the ground. If you're in high school, you have the choice of off the ground if you wanted to. I don't really know any high school player that does that. 1-inch block or a 2-inch block. Okay? So off the ground right here, we'll do this just because my ball's here. We're going to be a little bit deeper. Okay? So that means we're going to be a little bit more like that. So it's going to be a little bit closer to the towards your ankle, kind of the top of your instep. You know, if you have an instep of a shoe, right? That's kind of the instep, is that area right there. The instep of your shoe, it's going to be more toward the top or closer to your ankle part of your instep. Okay? Now as the tee gets bigger, you know, 1-inch block, we're going to move back just a little bit, and 2-inch block, we're going to move back just a touch more. So if you're kicking off a 2-inch block, you're kind of thinking that the depth of your plant foot, the ball needs to be in line. The midline of the ball, it's got a little seam right there, needs to be in line roughly with the bottom of the instep of your foot. So if you had the laces on, you know, on your typical shoe, this shoe doesn't do it, but if you had a typical shoe with the laces on top, I'm kicking off a 2-inch block, I'm going to be somewhere back here like this. Now if I'm kicking off of a 1-inch block, I'm going to go a little bit deeper. Then off the ground I'm going to be even more deep. You see how the central line right there, the central seam, is at the top of my instep off the ground. Scoot it back just a touch. It's about kind of midpoint of my instep on a 1-inch block, and then a little bit further back at the bottom of my instep for a 2-inch block. Okay, so that is basically it for the plant foot. Oh, so anyway, so just to kind of summarize, the plant foot is really not this hard sticking plant foot. It's more just a springboard just to kind of help translate our body forward. And it's got 2 components to it: width and depth. Okay, width. A lot of times the width depends more on kind of the length of your foot. If you got a long foot, the wider you are. If you got a short foot, the closer you can be to the ball. And the depth just simply means how far forward or in front of the ball you are versus how far back. And now remember, this is the one that you're going to have to tinker around a little bit with, depending on if you're on a 2-inch block or a 1-inch block or going down to the ground. Okay. Now again, don't hold me to everything that I'm saying, that these exact locations of your foot are not set in stone, because like I said, everybody's foot's a little bit longer or a little bit shorter, and everybody's a little bit different. But generally speaking, what I'm saying is correct. So it's a very good place to start. You know, if you never kicked before, start there. Use the length of your foot to figure out how wide you are, and use the rules of your instep, the depth of your foot. If you're on the 2-inch block, basically the rule of thumb is start at kind of the lower end of your instep. If you're on a 1-inch block, about the midpoint of your instep, and if you're kicking on the ground, you're going to be close to the top part of your instep, really pretty close to your ankle. Okay? So that's about it for today's episode, episode 2, all about the plant foot. Okay, got to have a good balanced plant foot. We'll get into some more down the road about some exercises and activities we can do to help with our balance and help with our plant foot a little bit. Join me next time. All right, episode 3, kicking position. This is a big one. This is one that I harp on a lot with a lot of my clients. But if you got any questions, any comments, holler back at me, and we'll see you next time.